Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome to the Raising Cain Show. I'm your host, Nate Cain, and tonight we are diving into a discussion about money, or maybe I should say Mountaineer money. West Virginia, like many states, is facing a weakening dollar while inflation continues to rise with no end in sight. But what if we could change that by creating a new currency based on gold and silver that could be used as legal tender, thus creating a true parallel economy? What would that look like? Tonight, we are thrilled to have my good friend Mark Paulus with us to explore this revolutionary idea of leveraging gold and silver to boost West Virginia's economy. This discussion will focus on how precious metals could enhance local commerce and provide much-needed financial stability. Join us as we examine this potential use, an innovative approach, and consider whether it could pave the way for the future of West Virginia, as well as other states. Mark Paulus, an advocate for economic innovation, brings his experience and expertise to this exciting conversation, currently residing in rural West Virginia. Mark is a seasoned professional with a diverse background and is deeply committed to solving future national challenges. Mark is working on the development of the West Virginia Silver Buck, a pioneering state currency aimed at economic revitalization. Mark, thank you for joining us tonight.
How are you, brother?
I'm doing great, man. I'm actually looking forward to this discussion tonight. I think it's something that a lot of people really don't know much about, and I'm hoping that this will spur on the conversation and get people talking about it, and hopefully we can, move our state legislature to do something about it. So, folks, on a more personal note, Mark was somebody who I met while I was campaigning for Congress, and we worked on the Parents' Bill of Rights together, and also we ended up talking about this idea of a silver buck, and we'll get more into the details of that tonight. But Mark is somebody who, along with also another guy who I'd spoken to from the same area, Frank Husker, we had gotten into these discussions, and I'll never forget. I thought I knew the Constitution. And it was Frank who had said to me, what do you think about gold and silver backed currency, as an alternative to the US dollar? And I said, well, I don't think that that's allowed for the states to be able to, create currency, because the Constitution, said that the federal government are the only ones that can do that. And he says, no, you need to read your Constitution again, because in there it states that they can mint coinage in gold and silver as legal tender. And so I went back, and lo and behold, there it was. So that was, kind of like my first experience really being opened up to this idea. And then as things started to progress and we got into, talking about or hearing people talking about what the Fed was doing and the idea of, a centralized bank, digital currency, and all different kinds of ways that the government could continue to manipulate, our monetary system. This idea began to grow on me, and it became something that I became fully committed to. And so that's just a little more personal background on kind of how I got drawn into this idea. And so, Mark, I guess, tell us how did you come into this, and how did this become, a reality for you as something that you wanted to pursue?
Well, for a start, this country is facing a financial collapse. And if you can't see that, I don't have the time to explain to you in detail why it's going to happen. If you're ignorant about that, there's nothing I can do for you. The proximate causes of the collapse are going to be debt default, bank failures, followed probably by hyperinflation. Right now, the debt of the federal government is approaching $35 trillion. In addition to that, there's about, some people think as much as $250, $300 trillion in unfunded liabilities. And that's become a number so large that it's an absurdity. We couldn't pay back that kind of money in 20 generations. So there's going to be a debt default coming. There's no question about that. And we're beyond anybody's ability to start that. That is compounded by what is called fractional reserve banking, which means the banking system worldwide is severely overleveraged. And when the first big bank goes down, it has the potential to bring down every bank in the world. If it starts in the Bank of Japan, which it might because the yen is falling, it has the potential to tsunami. By the early morning hours when we're still asleep, it's going to hit Europe. By the time we wake up at 8 a.m., it'll be in New York and Chicago. And then at that point, all bets are off because the banking system will come up, just fling apart like a scarecrow in the wind. And that will be followed most likely by hyperinflation as the Federal Reserve and other central banks begin to print more currency to cover the debts and bail out their buddies in the banks and in big business. And I mean, we're seeing the first effects of inflation now. Everybody knows that. You see it every day. But you haven't seen Weimar-style hyperinflation. In Weimar Germany during the 1920s, the money became so worthless, people were tying it up in big blocks and creating literally children's blocks of money so the kids could build forts because the paper had become so worthless, it wasn't even worth passing around. They didn't even count it. They weighed it on a scale to see how much was in there.
I remember, there's been some folks who have, seen the same kind of thing down in Venezuela, where, they had to go down there with a suitcase full of money in order to be able to, do anything. And, this real threat of hyperinflation, it is serious, and it could very well happen, especially in light of just the continued printing that's going on. And also the dollars losing its place in the as the world's reserve currency. I did a show on this a while back, or I've talked about this before, but we had this system in place. So, the dollar used to be backed by gold, and it no longer is. It's now fiat currency. And so it really has no value other than what the Fed says it's worth. And the problem is that while that might have worked, while we could, basically remove excess, currency out of circulation through, the forcing of people having to, buy U.S. dollars essentially in order to be able to buy oil. That is no longer the case anymore. The oil as a reserve currency, or dollars as a reserve currency for the purchasing of oil, that really has been going away for some time, but now it's gone. I mean, the Saudi Arabians now are no longer requiring people to buy dollars. So that, of course, increases the supply of U.S. dollars in the world economy, and supply and demand. The more money there is that's out there, the less value that it has. So there's that, along with the fact that you've got all of these restrictions, and some of the inflation that we're seeing, I think, is certainly, due to, it's artificially inflated due to things like the current administration not allowing for the drilling of oil and things like that, which is why we're seeing our gas prices rise. But Mark, you hear a lot on the radio and a lot in commercials about, buy gold, buy silver, sign up with this guy and, start getting, gold and silver and stacking it. what is the difference between that versus what we're talking about tonight?
Fiat currency is worth $1 because the government says so. But the only value of any currency is what the market determines it's worth. I don't care what the government says it's worth. Okay? Markets always determine the value of any good or service. It's called capitalism. Capitalism is completely organic, completely spontaneous, and totally natural. You can't stop it. Okay? So the markets will determine what the dollar is worth. And the paper dollar, before very much longer, is going to be worth absolutely nothing. However, there's something that's known as God's money, silver and gold, because silver and gold have an intrinsic value. Regardless of what the paper you're passing around is worth, if you can't trade that paper in dollar for dollar, ounce for ounce on a precious metal like we did prior to 1973, I guess it was, before Nixon took us off the gold standard, paper doesn't mean a darn thing. People believe the dollar is worth $1, and that's all it's worth, is your belief. And as soon as people stop believing, it's not worth anything. And that's where, if you're an ordinary citizen, you need to educate yourself. You know, what's the difference between this, so we can get it on the screen here, and this one. So this is a Kennedy half dollar, what's commonly called as junk silver. I think it's 0.7 of an ounce. And this round is what's known as they call it a buffalo round. It's 1 troy ounce. You need to know the difference. You need to, if you're an ordinary citizen of West Virginia, you need to go scavenging around your house and find out how much gold and silver you have. Are you stacking gold and silver? If you are, you're a very wise person. But maybe you've got a sterling silver tea set that grandma left you. That's got bullion value. Maybe you got an old coin collection. It's full of what they call junk silver. That's pre-1965 coinage. That's real gold and silver. Maybe you have a collection of silver jewelry. But that's the thing about silver especially, well, gold too, is it comes in different grades. You know, you've heard of 24 karat gold, 22 karat, 18 karat. You got to know what that means. Excuse me. And so you need to educate yourself. And if you're a stacker, it's because you already understand these things. Regardless of what the government says your paper dollar is worth, the market says there's an equivalent in gold and silver. Now, back when I introduced the West Virginia silver buck to you, which was about a year ago, I got one here. So we can get it in the screen. It's kind of reflecting. You got Andrew Jackson on the front there with the words, "I killed the bank." When I introduced this idea to you a year ago, the West Virginia silver buck was worth 73 cents. Today it's worth 95 cents based on the spot price of silver. Earlier in the spring, it was worth $1.03 based on the fact that it contains 1 gram of 0.999 fine silver. So whatever's printed on the face of that bill really doesn't matter. It's a gram of silver, which we call it a buck because it's approximately on a par with the US dollar right now.
Right, for right now. Now, you know, this here, and you sent me one of these. The idea behind it is that what makes this different, I think, than, say, stacking or collectors, you know, and things like that, is the idea, folks, would be to get our state legislature to essentially, you know, create this item here, and it would actually have silver in it. Or in the case of gold, and I have some examples here, these are what are known as gold backs. And here's an example. They get some really beautiful artwork on it, but there's real gold in this. And you've got several denominations. And the idea behind this, right now, you can't just go and walk into a grocery store and buy a loaf of bread. That's not possible. I mean, some of these are worth, you know, $100 or, you know, $150. You got some that are worth, you know, $50. it depends on the amount that's in there. But the idea behind the silver buck is that this is really worth $1 or close to it. So the idea is that, if you walked in with, say, walked into a grocery store, number one, if you've got silver bullion or you've got silver, unless they've got a scale and a way to measure that and they're willing to take that, there's no way for you to go in and buy, say, a loaf of bread. And the gold denominations are great for larger amounts, but they really don't allow you to go and buy something that would be, under $100. I mean, that's the idea behind that. Is with this is that it would match more similarly, our current currency, the US dollar, and to have a parallel currency that we would have that would be accepted as legal tender here in the state of West Virginia. Now, there are some other states that are starting to do this sort of thing. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, Texas is, to my understanding, has already established a gold and silver bullion bank, and gold and silver are legal currency in Texas. There's also Utah, which is moving along the same lines. I don't know if they have an actual gold and silver bullion bank yet, but I think they have legalized gold and silver, not just for public debt, which is something we've done in West Virginia, but also for private debt. So they have declared gold and silver money. Okay. The key to the West Virginia silver buck at exactly 1 gram, 999 fine, is it provides a standard. So if Texas were to adopt a Texas Silver Star, or Utah were to adopt a Utah Silver Honeybee or whatever they do over there, you could trade on a par with either of those states. You could take the West Virginia buck to Texas and people would accept it because it's got 1 gram of 999 pure silver, and that's where the value is, and that's embedded right in the paper. Now, people ask, well, what if people start ripping the silver out of that and taking it down to the local jeweler or the local coin shop and trading it in based on the bullion value? And it's like, well, they're welcome to do that. But if you get them enough of these things in circulation, people won't have to do it. They'll realize it's worth whatever the spot rate is on that individual day. You don't have to rip the silver out of it. People are going to see it's silver. Just accept it just the way it is. And you need that standard. And that's the thing is, 1 gram is a good standard, especially because it's worth approximately $1 right now. Because working with troy ounce is 31 grams. That's just a clumsy number to have to calculate. Junk silver, which is the pre-1965 U.S. coinage, it has varying degrees of silver in it because it's an amalgam. And it's just, the math is just too clumsy. We have to standardize. And we need that gold and silver bank, the bullion bank, to back our currency. To in the event that there's a collapse, the economy won't collapse completely. There's still going to be local economies, but you're going to need some sort of an interim to get us through that period of destruction and rebuilding before we go back on a gold and silver standard. And that's the point.
There's another reason why, to me, this was kind of a important step, in my opinion, for states like West Virginia to do this. And that is, there is a massive push towards the central bank digital currency. And it's inevitable. They're going to move towards it. I mean, most people aren't carrying around cash with them anymore. But the moment that the feds do that, and the moment that the feds take us off of any kind of paper money or anything like that, and we have to go to digital currency, they will have total control over seeing everything that we spend our money on. And there are certain things that I don't care for the federal government to know, where I'm spending my money. For example, if I go buy guns or I go buy ammo, I don't want the federal government keeping tabs on how much I'm buying. It's not that I have anything to hide, but it's none of their damn business. And that is one of the things that I think is really great about, coming up with a alternate currency, which according to the Constitution, we are allowed to do so long as it is related to gold and silver. One of the things that we would need, though, and I think this is something that we would have to put into place, is some sort of state trust bank. And the reason for that is there are folks like myself who, I have my contracts are with the federal government. Obviously, they're not going to pay me in West Virginia gold or silver, silver bucks. They're gonna pay me in either U.S. dollars or in central bank digital currency or whatever means that they're going to do it by. And I need somewhere that I can take that central bank digital currency and transfer that into to real gold and silver currency that would be here in West Virginia. So that's one of the ideas behind that that I think is a really good thing, that this could be an alternative for an overly powerful Federal Reserve and a way for the states to take back some of their sovereignty and be able to have some control over their local economy. What say you?
Well, yeah, I mean, the point of the digital currency is control. That's all it is. Who doesn't see that? At this point, is there anybody in this country who trusts the federal government on anything? If you do, I got nothing more to tell you. Trusting your federal government on any level is just a fool's errand.
Well, and in particular,
I was going to say, we have to go local. We have to go local, state, district, community level, and that's where the economy will be restructured. It will start at the local level, because people still have to eat. People still have to heat their homes. Services like schooling are still going to be needed and going to be necessary. And the economy of this country will be restarted like it was in Germany in 1945 on a very, very basic level. And this is the currency that will power the revival.
I had our agriculture commissioner on last week on Tuesday, and we were talking about that, buying local and the importance of that. Part of it is just knowing what it is that you're consuming. And I think the truth is that having a means of being able to purchase goods and services with something other than the U.S. dollar, the other advantage that gives us is it gives us the ability to survive something where if the dollar completely collapses, we are not completely on our own. We will have another means of being able to buy and sell and conduct commerce. I do think that this is an absolute necessity. I think this is it is a national security issue as well as a state economy security issue. I'm concerned that if we don't have something like this, and like you had mentioned, in our local economies, we'll probably be okay. Anything that's imported, that's where we're going to have the problem. If you have something that is imported from overseas, you can guarantee that as the dollar continues to drop in value, that whatever it is that we're importing is going to become more and more expensive. And we're seeing this already with farmers, where pretty much the majority of fertilizer is imported from Russia, and because of the war in the Ukraine, those prices have skyrocketed. 600% in some cases. And so these guys that are trying to, fertilize their fields, they're having to pay that cost. Fuel costs for their tractors, same thing. So the more that we create things here, and that includes the more that our economy is local, the less impacted it is by these types of inflationary, pressures. So I do think that this is something that could help offset that. And, it really is pretty amazing, how they make this. I want to just pull up one of these right here. So this is an example of a $1 or it's a 1/1000th of a troy ounce of 24 karat gold. Okay, is in this. And as you can see, it's got a very, nice picture on it. And it it basically, you can put this in your wallet. It bends, it folds. I mean, this is really, kind of a neat thing. And we absolutely could do this. And so we need to be moving in this direction, I think, and creating this kind of currency. Tell me about Sound Money Initiative. What does that mean? And give me some details on what is that?
There is a movement around the country. It's actually called the Honest Money Initiative, which is a rejection of fiat currency in the understanding that it's going to collapse.
Let's start with that. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but fiat currency, some of the listeners may not know what that term means. What does fiat currency mean? And then, then go back to, talking about what honest money is in the comparison.
Fiat currency exists because the government declares it exists. That's all it is. Essentially, I declare that this is worth $1. It doesn't matter how many of them I make, print, digitally, or in paper. It's the government establishing a standard. This goes back again to markets. Only markets can declare what a currency is worth. That's why currencies fluctuate on a daily basis in the markets. And the West Virginia silver buck will also fluctuate. Most likely, over the long term, it's going to soar. Okay? But people are going to have to get used to the idea that they go into a grocery store and they have a debit card from the Gold and Silver Trust Bank. Today, the silver buck may be worth $1.10. Tomorrow, I may only get $1.08 for it. A year from now, I might get $2 for it. So it operates as almost like a foreign currency in parallel with the dollar.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've lived overseas in Japan, and I lived there for 3 years, and you could buy things with US dollars or with yen. But you needed to know, what the value was that day. They'd set the price that day, and so the store would open up, and if you were near the base and you wanted to spend US dollars, they would allow you to, but then it would fluctuate, because it would fluctuate against the yen. So that would be more or less, almost like a foreign currency, except in this case, it would be a currency that would be tied to the spot price of gold and silver.
But Americans are already used to this. They just don't think of it in these terms. Every gas station in the country has a marquee where they post the price of gasoline, the various grades. And that changes sometimes every day, at least every week. So they're used to seeing this. The average person say, oh, the price of gas has gone up. Well, an economist looks at it a different way. An economist would tell you, no, the value of a gallon of gas has gone up in relation to the value of a paper dollar. It's just a change of mindset, and people will get used to it. They already are in a sense. Okay. And when they realize that the silver or the gold back is appreciating in value, they're going to keep as many of those as they can, and they're going to spend the dishonest money, because quite frankly, the Federal Reserve is the world's biggest counterfeiter. Yeah. They can just print them up as much as they want, whenever they want. And there's no brakes on the system. That leads to hyperinflation. So people will get used to the fluctuation, but they're also going to get used to the idea that to retain value in your currency, it's going to have to be gold and silver.
So, Mark, I need to cut to a commercial break to give an opportunity for our sponsors. But, folks, we will be right back to talk more about this and to get into how this would boost the local economy, and to get into several other things to talk about in relation to this. So we will be right back.
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees, and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
Military use when they need unlimited power during critical missions. Civilians like you can now get their hands on the exact same technology within 24 hours for pennies on the dollar. Folks, as a former infantry soldier, I can tell you this is the best and cheapest way to get reliable, unlimited energy. And no, I'm not talking about regular generators or the expensive solar panels. You don't have to be an electrician to do it. There's no maintenance needed. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And the best part, you won't need to rely on the power grid anymore. Click below now and hit play.
We're back. This is the Raising Cain show, and I'm here with my guest, Mark Paulus. So we've been talking about the concept of a gold-backed and silver-backed currency here in West Virginia, and to be able to use that as legal tender. And before we went on break, we were talking about specifically about the difference between fiat currency and honest currency or honest money. Mark, tell me a little bit about, the advocates argue that using silver can boost the local economy by encouraging in-state commerce and protecting against inflation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The value of precious metals, both gold and silver, is going to increase against the U.S. dollar. Or to put it another way, the value of the U.S. dollar is going to fall against the value of gold and silver. Now, especially right now, we know for a fact that the Chinese are buying massive amounts of gold, especially on the international markets. And our own bankers are selling them that gold because right now the Chinese are willing to pay something like $2,700 an ounce for gold, where the value in Chicago and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is only $2,400. So these bankers have an opportunity to make money on the arbitrage, on a $300 difference between what the price is set in Chicago and what the Chinese are willing to pay for it. Same thing is going on with silver. Our bankers are selling this country out. They're shipping our silver over there at an arbitrage. The Chinese are willing to pay $33, $34 an ounce for it. And today, the spot price was like $29.50, $30. So we're shipping our money overseas to BRICS nations who intend to create a new currency based at least in part on gold and silver. So if our legislature in West Virginia is wise, we need to do what the Chinese are doing. We need to start hoarding gold and silver and putting it in a trust bank to support our West Virginia currency. There's no other way. Otherwise, we're going to suffer.
So one of the things that I had talked about during my campaign was this idea that, West Virginia, we export about $7 billion worth of product. And that's, of course, in coal, oil, and gas, and, agriculture products, all sorts of things. In fact, I was shocked to find out that we actually produce more. This was last week. I found out we produce more maple syrup here than Vermont does. And so we've got a lot of products that we're producing and shipping out of the state. But, when we ship stuff overseas, and in particular, energy products are what gets shipped overseas, our coal in particular, liquefied natural gas. Wouldn't it make sense for us to say, hey, China, India, Brazil, we're going to send you coal, but if you pay us in gold and silver, we will cut you, a discounted, we'll sell it to you at a discounted rate. That, to me, you would quickly fill up West Virginia's treasury with gold and silver, which actually has real value, very quickly. And it would give us a very strong economy here, I think, in West Virginia. And that would be something that would be pretty simple to do, because obviously then those that are selling the product, they're going to want to take some of that difference. And, and so they're going to offer those discounted rates and pass those along. So we say we basically would say to those that are selling these products, hey, if you pay your taxes, your state taxes in gold and silver, then we will cut you a significant tax break. And then the vendor or the person selling, those products overseas, they would obviously go to them and say, hey, we'll cut you a deal. We'll give you a percentage of what we're going to save if you pay us in gold and silver. And to me, it makes sense. What is your thoughts on that?
That's a radical idea, because what it makes us is an associate partner in the BRICS trading system. Imagine that. West Virginia joining the BRICS, essentially what it is. And we need a way to get what we need. The Texas economy is big enough. What is Texas, like 25 million people? West Virginia is 1.7 million. If Texas adopts the same system, we could trade on a par with them for pretty much everything that we need. We can ship them West Virginia coal, and they can ship us manufactured goods, Texas beef, whatever we need. We're a small state. We don't need a large trading partner. But opening it up, that a gold and silver standard would open us up to the entire world. And that's just fine. We'll be better off than states who have nothing, or nations that have nothing in the way of gold and silver. I understand that Canada sold all its gold reserves. It couldn't be a more foolish government in the history of the world.
Yeah. Can you talk about, obviously, in order to do this, it's going to take action by our state legislatures. Can you talk about what legislative efforts have happened here in West Virginia, or what you're planning to do to encourage our state legislature to adopt this sort of thing?
Well, you and I are going to have to work together on this, Nate, because I know you've been down to Charleston many times, and you know a lot of politicians personally. We talked with members on the banking committee. We've got our local representatives we need to contact, but we need to start floating that idea soon, perhaps even before the next administration is sworn in. We're going to have to contact the new governor, and we're going to have to explain how this works, and we're going to have to start rallying the necessary support. But we're going to have politicians capable of understanding what's coming, and quite frankly, if they're elected officials and they don't understand what's ahead, they've got no business being in office. Now, I can understand if they don't understand the value of gold and silver and how it works, because most Americans don't, but they can be educated on this and how it works. So the first step will be to establish that bullion bank, and then we can insist on perhaps adopting the West Virginia silver bucks as a standard. Gold and silver, already legal tender for paying public debts. We need to extend that to private, which is going to happen anyway, because once people figure out that they can pay their taxes in gold and silver, they'll understand it's money, and they're going to begin to accept it amongst themselves. If the government's willing to accept it, so is my neighbor.
That's right. That's right. And something that's standardized and, essentially minted here in or printed here in West Virginia, it's going to have, I think that's probably the biggest thing, is we need to have those assurances that this does have a value, that it is, not counterfeited and that sort of thing. And so to me, this is where I think the state can really, benefit from this, because it will create a stable currency here in West Virginia, no matter what happens to the US dollar. There is economic independence to me is important. I think it's important to most West Virginians and most, independent-minded people. The idea, is to increase economic independence from the federal monetary policies and systems. And so that's another thing that I see. West Virginia right now, like every state, we're 100% beholden to the Federal Reserve. We're beholden to the federal government. And there are some other questions that come into play with this, because if we create a separate currency, and let's say that somebody is working here in West Virginia and they are getting paid in silverbacks or goldbacks, or the West Virginia silver buck, or these goldbacks from West Virginia, then there becomes some questions about, can the IRS even collect taxes on that? It's not, it doesn't fall within, the current, currency system. So, this could provide some interesting opportunities for independence, economically for West Virginia. It also, it lends, the idea of, not being able to be manipulated by say, Joe Biden doing what he does with the oil and gas industries, where he goes and sells off some of our reserve in order to lower prices, and then stops drilling so that prices go up. And we see this all over the place in the United States, oftentimes by the president through his policies, or through Congress setting different policies down. This would really take it out of their hands. It would be really ultimately up to the state. And if the state decided to be a good steward, of their wealth, they could actually excel quite a bit above other, certainly above other states that are 100% reliant on the Federal Reserve. But we could prevent ourselves from becoming, so tied to the hip, to the Federal Reserve. What are your thoughts on that?
The federal government can't stop this. First of all, there are ample precedents. During the period 1812 to about 1845, the most common currency west of the Mississippi was the Mexican silver peso. And that's because when the Santa Fe Trail opened up, the people of Santa Fe, El Paso, and the northern territories of newly minted Mexico were allowed to trade legally with the Yankees for the first time. Only Mexicans didn't have anything of value. They needed manufactured goods desperately, and there were some mines that have been opened up recently in Chihuahua, and the Mexicans said, fine, all we have is the Mexican silver peso. And the Yankee traders came in with their manufactured goods and said, hey, yeah, silver, that's good enough for us. We come in with Conestoga wagons loaded with manufactured goods, and we leave in mule trains with sacks of silver. So much of it became the preferred currency west of the Mississippi for a period of about 35 years. And
wow.
once it gets into circulation, the government can't stop it, because you can't stop people from trading. What are they going to do? Shake down every citizen on the street and demand you open your wallet to see if there's any silver bucks inside? I guess the depository for the West Virginia Trust Bank is going to have to be in a hidden location, because I wouldn't put it beyond any tyrannical government to try to raid the depository to seize the gold and silver. That has happened before. So we keep it in a secure location that the federal government doesn't know about under heavily armed guard. They're not going to stop it any more than any government's had any success in stopping a black market. Black markets are a natural form of capitalism. And let me give you an extreme example. In the Soviet Union in the 20s and 30s, Joseph Stalin collectivized the peasantry. He seized all their land. And then the average peasant in the Soviet Union had to go to work on his own land for a government paycheck. Well, the result, of course, was near starvation, right? For a period of about 3 years, the Ukraine lost about 3 million people. One of the world's largest bread baskets lost 3 million people in a famine. Well, Stalin got a report that peasants were growing vegetables in the backyard and raising pigs on the side. So we don't have any record of the conversation, but the Soviet government decided they're going to situation. Maybe they're going to have to crack down on this. When the results came back, it turned out that the 99% of the land controlled by the government was only providing 50% of the agriculture consumed in the Soviet Union. The other 50% of the food produced in the Soviet Union was produced on 1% of the land still held in private hands. You see, you can't stop capitalism. It just happens because people are going to trade. People are going to produce. People react to incentives. You can't stop it. And it's going to be the same thing everywhere else. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to go into somebody's lumber yard and seize their, seized firewood and the silver bucks they're using to trade.